Hello. I always found it amusing how people think they can cheat in the digital age and not get caught. It's almost adorable, the way they sneak around, thinking they're pulling off some grand heist, completely oblivious to the fact that they leave behind more evidence than a crime scene at a fast food robbery. That's how I caught my wife, by the way. Not through paranoia, not through snooping, not because I had some gut feeling gnawing at me. No, I caught her because she's just that bad at covering her tracks. It started with a simple notification. Not even a text, just a calendar reminder that popped up on our shared iCloud account. Dinner with M, 8 p.m. Don't forget new dress. Now, I don't know about you, but when a married woman schedules dinner with M and makes a special note about looking good for it, it's rarely because she's trying to impress her mother. And I know for a fact that M wasn't any of her friends or coworkers. Most men, at this point, would have reacted emotionally. Maybe they'd confront her right away, demand answers, throw a tantrum, or sink into self-pity. I'm not most men. I don't scream. I don't beg. I don't throw punches unless absolutely necessary. Instead, I analyze. I calculate. I observe. Because that's how you win a game like this. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't drop hints. I didn't change my behavior in the slightest. I wanted her to think she was safe. Because when people feel safe, they get sloppy. And when they get sloppy, that's when you trap them. So, I did what any rational man would do. I started gathering data. And it didn't take much. A quick peek at her phone while she was in the shower confirmed everything. I didn't even need to unlock it. The preview of a message was enough. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same hotel? From a number not saved in her contacts. But here's the thing. I knew exactly who it was. Her boss. It wasn't even shocking. If anything, it was predictable. The late nights at work, the sudden business trips, the way she started dressing up a little too much for what was supposed to be a desk job. The signs were there, clear as day. And he? A classic case. Mid-40s, married, rich, and the type of man who thinks he's untouchable. But here's where it gets interesting. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted efficiency. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. It's messy, dramatic, and usually backfires. Efficiency? That's about making sure the fallout is so devastatingly precise that the person you're targeting never recovers. So I played along. Acted normal. Kissed her goodbye that morning like nothing had changed, even asked about her day. And that night, when she said she had to work late, I simply smiled and told her not to overwork herself. She smiled back, thinking she was the mastermind of some great deception. I had to hold back a laugh. While she was busy getting ready for her business meeting, I was busy too. On my laptop, compiling everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. Photos from our home security system, showing her slipping out in a dress she definitely didn't wear to the office that morning. Text logs I retrieved from our cloud storage, because apparently, she never figured out that deleted doesn't actually mean gone. And the piece de resistance? The email I had drafted, addressed to her company's HR department. Not a dramatic, angry rant. No, that would be too simple. This was a professional, coldly worded complaint. One that included evidence of workplace misconduct, abuse of power, and a clear violation of corporate ethics policies. I attached everything. Every damning piece of evidence. The kind that doesn't just get someone fired, it gets them blacklisted. Then, I scheduled it. A delayed send. 9 a.m. sharp, the next morning. The perfect time. Just as she'd be walking into work, just as he'd be settling into his office, just as neither of them would have the slightest clue that their entire professional lives were about to implode. But I wasn't done. No, not yet. Because what's the point of setting a trap if you don't get to watch the moment they realize they're caught? That's why, instead of sitting at home fuming, I got into my car and followed her. Not closely, just enough to confirm the location. A hotel, just as expected. The same one from the texts. I parked a block away, leaned back in my seat, and waited. And sure enough, within minutes, he arrived. I watched as they greeted each other in the lobby, all smiles, all giddy like a couple of teenagers sneaking off after curfew. It was almost adorable, really. Watching a grown man, a CEO, no less, throw away everything for a bit of excitement with someone else's wife. I let them have their fun. Let them feel safe. Because tomorrow, that safety would be ripped away in an instant. And the best part? Neither of them had any idea it was coming. Life, for the most part, was good. Comfortable. Predictable. The kind of existence where you wake up every morning knowing exactly what the day will bring, and there's a certain peace in that. No surprises. No chaos. Just stability. I used to think that was a good thing. Mornings started the same way. The smell of coffee brewing before I even got out of bed, because she always woke up a few minutes earlier than me. She claimed it was because she liked having quiet time before the day started, but looking back, I wonder if that was ever really true. Maybe she just liked being one step ahead. I'd come downstairs, half awake, and she'd already be there in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with that distant, content smile. She always looked so put together, even first thing in the morning. Hair neat, makeup subtle but perfect, like she'd just stepped out of a skincare commercial. It was something I used to admire about her. The way she carried herself, as if she was always in control. She'd glance up, flash me that familiar smirk, and slide my mug across the counter. Strong, no sugar, she'd say, like she didn't make it the same way every single morning for the past 5 years. Routine. Steady. Safe. Evenings were much the same. I'd come home from work, and she'd already be there, lounging on the couch with a glass of wine, the TV playing in the background. She never cared what was on, just liked the noise. Some nights, we'd cook together. Other nights, she'd claim she was too tired and convince me to order in. We'd eat, talk about nothing in particular, and by 10, she'd be curled up in bed, already half asleep. It was a life I thought was perfect. But perfection is just an illusion, isn't it? You don't notice the cracks in the glass until the whole thing shatters. And in hindsight, those cracks were everywhere. Like the way she started locking her phone. Not just putting it face down on the table, but actually locking it. That never used to be a thing. We never had passwords before. There was no need. But one day, she set one, and when I asked, she just laughed it off. Privacy is important, babe. You never know who might try to snoop. Snoop? Who would be snooping? Or how she started going to the gym after work, even though she never cared about fitness before. I remember joking about it once. Since when did you become a gym rat? She laughed, but the response stuck with me. Since I realized I wanted to start taking care of myself. You should come with me sometime. At the time, I shrugged it off. She was being healthy. Nothing wrong with that. But now I wonder, was she ever at the gym at all? Or was she with him? And then there were the business trips. They weren't common, maybe once every few months, but they started happening more frequently. Just overnight stays, nothing too suspicious. Always somewhere nearby. Always so last minute. I remember one night, she packed her bag in a hurry, her phone buzzing as she stuffed clothes into her suitcase. She was flustered, not her usual put-together self. I asked where she was going. Just a client dinner. The team decided to make it an overnight trip last minute. She kissed me goodbye, promised to call later, and walked out the door with that same distant smile. The call never came. Back then, I told myself she was just busy. Work was demanding. She was ambitious. Always had been. That's what I loved about her. She had drive. But now I see it for what it was. A carefully constructed lie. I think about all the times I caught her glancing at her phone and smiling, only to quickly put it away when she saw me looking. The time she came home, wearing perfume that I knew she didn't leave the house with. The sudden new lingerie that she never wore for me. The extra effort she put into looking good, but not for me. It was all right there. The clues. The warning signs. I just didn't want to see them. Because why would I? We were happy. We had the house, the stability, the inside jokes. We finished each other's sentences. She knew exactly how I liked my coffee, and I knew she hated sleeping with the closet doors open. We were a team. We had a life. I was the kind of husband who trusted without question, who never once considered the possibility that the person I built a future with would be the one to burn it all down. And that was my mistake. Because while I was living in the comfort of routine, she was living a double life. And the moment I realized that, that's when everything changed. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that was supposed to be slow and easy. The kind where we'd wake up late, make coffee together, maybe head out for brunch if we felt like it. The kind of morning that had played out the same way for years. But that day, something was off. She was already awake when I rolled over, which wasn't unusual, but she wasn't in bed. The smell of coffee wasn't in the air. The house was too quiet, too still. I found her downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table, her back to me, phone in hand. I knew that posture, the kind people take when they don't want anyone seeing what's on their screen. I didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the doorway, watching. Normally, when she saw me in the morning, she'd look up and smile, make some sarcastic comment about my messy hair, ask if I wanted coffee. But this time, nothing. She didn't even notice I was there. Then, she did something that made my stomach tighten. She glanced over her shoulder. A quick, sharp look. Like she was making sure she was alone. Like she was hiding something. And then, she turned her phone face down. I stayed quiet for a second longer, letting the moment stretch, seeing if she'd say something first. She didn't. So I made my presence known. "Morning," I said, my voice casual. She jumped. Not a big reaction, but just enough. A tiny, startled movement that she immediately tried to cover with a laugh. "Hey, didn't hear you come down." I walked over, glancing at her phone as I passed, but she had already pulled her hands away from it. Defensive. Subtle, but noticeable. Very noticeable. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Yeah, of course," she said quickly. Too quickly. And then, the lie. "Just checking emails. Work stuff. Work stuff." On a Saturday morning. At 7 a.m. Now, normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it. She worked in a demanding field, and emails weren't unusual. But something about the way she said it, the speed, the forced casualness, the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, made my instincts flare up. It wasn't the words. It was the delivery. I let the silence hang between us for a beat, watching her, waiting to see if she'd fill it. But she just picked up her coffee and took a sip, eyes locked on the table. I sat down across from her, studying her face. She looked the same. Same sharp features, same perfectly brushed hair, same confident posture. But something was different. "You've been working a lot lately," I said. She shrugged. "Yeah, you know how it is." I did. But I also knew how she used to complain about how overworked she was. How she'd roll her eyes when her boss asked her to handle extra projects. How she used to say, "I swear, if they expect me to answer emails on weekends, I'm quitting." And yet, here she was, up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, checking emails like her life depended on it. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept it, but something in me had shifted. Something wasn't right. Still, I played my role. I made coffee, sat with her, and let the conversation drift to normal things. Weekend plans, errands we needed to run, what we should have for dinner. But beneath it all, a quiet suspicion had started growing in my mind. And then came the second red flag. Her phone buzzed. I watched her body stiffen just slightly. A reflex. Like someone bracing for impact. She didn't check it immediately. That was the first sign. Normally, she'd just pick it up without thinking. But this time, she let it buzz. Let it sit there, screen down, like it didn't matter. Like she didn't even notice. Except, she did notice. I knew because her fingers twitched. A small movement. Like she was fighting the urge to reach for it. I leaned back, sipping my coffee. "Aren't you going to check that?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then she forced a smile. "Just work." Again with the work excuse. This time, I didn't buy it. Still, I didn't push. Not yet. I just nodded, sipping my coffee, pretending I didn't see the way her pulse had picked up slightly in her neck. Pretending I wasn't memorizing every detail of this moment. Because I knew, right then and there, that something was happening. It wasn't proof, not yet. Not enough to confront her. Not enough to say with certainty that she was hiding something. But it was the first crack in the foundation. And I was going to find out exactly how deep it went. I didn't believe in coincidences anymore, not after that morning, not after the way she hesitated, the way she turned her phone face down, the way she lied so smoothly. Without a second thought, I had spent years thinking I knew her every habit, every little tick, but now I was starting to realize I had only been seeing what she wanted me to see, so I did what any rational man would do. I started watching carefully, quietly, not giving her any reason to suspect that I was onto her. It started small, subtle things, little test questions that should have had easy answers, but somehow they didn't. I asked her what time she got off work one evening, just a casual question, nothing that should have made her nervous, but instead of answering right away, she paused for just a second, then said the usual time, but her eyes flickered away for the briefest moment, and that was enough. It was always the small things, the little inconsistencies that gave people away. Then there was the matter of her phone. It was different now, always locked, always on silent, notifications turned off. I remembered when we used to share passcodes without a second thought, when she used to hand me her phone without hesitation if I needed to look something up, but now if I so much as reached toward it, she would instinctively pull it away like it was some kind of precious artifact, and that was when I knew for sure that whatever was happening wasn't just in my head. So I started digging, but not directly. No, that would have been too obvious. I needed her to feel safe to keep making mistakes, so I let her think I was clueless, that I was still the same trusting husband who believed every word that came out of her mouth. But at the same time, I started paying attention to details I never used to notice. Her routine was shifting little by little. She was staying late at work more often, not every night, just enough to make it seem reasonable if she were questioned. But when I checked the company website and cross-referenced their operating hours, they never had client meetings past 6. And yet she was coming home at 8, sometimes later, always with some perfect excuse, always with that same easy smile that I used to find charming, but now it just looked like a mask. Then there was the car. I started checking the mileage. Nothing dramatic at first, just small inconsistencies, a few extra miles here and there, nothing that would raise suspicion if you weren't looking. But I was looking, and the numbers weren't adding up. Her office was exactly 13 miles from our house. But some nights when she got home, the odometer showed an extra 20, maybe 30 miles, missing pieces of a puzzle that was starting to take shape. The real breakthrough came when I casually mentioned a location I knew she hadn't been to. I told her that a friend had seen her near a particular cafe one afternoon, a place completely out of her way, and I watched her face carefully, not for the words, but for the reaction. And there it was, the flicker of panic before she caught herself, the half-second hesitation, before she denied it too quickly, too forcefully. She was slipping, and she knew it. At this point, I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was certain, but certainty wasn't enough. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof, because when I confronted her, I wasn't going to give her a single inch of room to lie or twist the story. I wanted to see the moment she realized there was no way out. So I played along. I let her believe she was winning, that I was still blind, still trusting, while I continued gathering information, every excuse, every misplaced piece of information, every moment where her story didn't quite line up. And with each passing day, the truth became clearer. She wasn't just lying, she was building an entirely separate life, a life she thought I would never discover, but she had underestimated me. Because I wasn't just going to catch her, I was going to dismantle everything she thought she was getting away with. And when the time was right, she wouldn't even see it coming. It happened faster than I expected. One moment, I was still piecing things together, still connecting the dots, still questioning whether I was overthinking. And then, in a single instant, everything became undeniable. The truth hit me like a freight train, but instead of knocking me down, it sharpened something inside me, made me colder, clearer, more focused. Because now, there was no room for doubt, no space for excuses. I finally had exactly what I needed, and she had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was already gone. It was a message, a single, careless message that changed everything. She had been careful up until now, deleting conversations, keeping things vague when she spoke, watching her words. But people always slip up when they feel safe, and she had been feeling safe, too safe. She didn't expect me to check the work laptop. After all, she never used it at home, and even if she did, she must have assumed that, like always, I respected her privacy. She assumed wrong. I didn't even have to dig. The moment I opened the laptop, the email tab was still logged in. It was sitting there, right in front of me, an unsent draft, half-written, like she had been in the middle of it and got distracted. Maybe she had planned to delete it before sending, or maybe she thought she had more time. Either way, she didn't. Hey, I can't stop thinking about last night. It's getting harder to pretend at home. When can I see you again? My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel sick, or dizzy, or weak. I just went still, like a machine powering down every unnecessary function to focus on one thing, processing. Every detail was right there. His name, his email, the way she signed off with her initials, like some kind of twisted inside joke between them. And the timestamp, confirming she had written this while sitting right across from me on our couch, pretending to be lost in some meaningless TV show while secretly planning her next meeting with him. I stared at the words for exactly 10 seconds, long enough to memorize every single one. Then, methodically, I started going deeper. The email history, the cloud storage, the message logs, everything. And what I found was worse than I could have imagined. This wasn't some reckless, one-time mistake. This wasn't some drunken lapse in judgment. This was planned, repeated, ongoing. There were dinner reservations, hotel bookings, plans they had made for the future, a future where I didn't exist. And the worst part? The casualness of it. The ease. Like betraying me had become just another part of her routine. Like she had done it so many times that it no longer required effort. I felt something then. Not heartbreak. Not sorrow. Not even rage. Just a quiet, calculated understanding. She had played me for a fool. But that was over now. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly, like I was resetting myself. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the way she always used to say, "You're too calm for your own good." One day, it's going to scare me. That day had come. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken, because I wasn't. I was in control now. She had been playing a game she thought she was winning. She had no idea I was about to rewrite the rules. Revenge isn't about anger, it isn't about screaming or breaking things or making a scene. That's what weak men do, that's what men who don't understand power do. No, real revenge is quiet, it's calculated, it's a slow and inevitable collapse so perfect, so absolute, that by the time they realize what's happening it's already too late. And that's exactly how I was going to handle this, because she thought she was clever, she thought she had control, she thought she had me fooled, but the truth was she had no idea that I was already 10 steps ahead. I sat in silence for a long time, thinking not about what she did, not about the betrayal itself, because that was irrelevant now. What mattered was how to make sure that when I walked away from this, I was the one standing at the top, and she was left with nothing, not just financially, but socially, professionally, emotionally. I wasn't going to take revenge in some childish way. I wasn't going to leave some angry note or trash her things that would be too simple, too predictable. No, I needed to dismantle everything carefully, deliberately, piece by piece. The first step was the foundation, the job, the security, the thing that gave her a sense of power, her position at work, the one she had spent years climbing towards, the one she had used as an excuse for late nights and weekends away. Except now I had proof that she had been doing more than working, and more importantly, I had the receipts, the emails, the hotel reservations, the timestamps of company funds being used for personal trips, the messages exchanged during business hours on company devices, and I knew exactly where to send them: the board, the investors, HR, even the competitors. It wouldn't just be about her, it would be about him too, her boss, her lover, her accomplice, because when this hit, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be a complete collapse. But that was only the beginning, because once she lost her position, her credibility would go with it, and with credibility goes opportunity. She had spent years building an image of success, of respectability, but no one hires a liability, no one trusts someone with a history of personal and professional misconduct. I wasn't just taking away her job, I was closing every door before she could reach for the handle. Then there was the personal fallout. She thrived on perception, she cared about how people saw her, she cultivated this perfect image of a devoted wife, a career woman, someone who had it all, and I was going to shatter that image from the inside out, not through public drama, but through careful exposure, private enough that she couldn't claim I was out to ruin her, but damaging enough that whispers would spread, because nothing destroys a person faster than social isolation. And then there was the exit, the moment where I would step away completely, but not before making sure that she knew exactly what had happened and exactly who had done it, because revenge isn't just about destruction, it's about awareness, it's about making sure they understand that every single consequence was earned, that every loss, every failure, every door slammed in their face is the direct result of the choices they made. And that's why I wasn't going to rush this. I was going to be patient, I was going to be methodical, and I was going to enjoy watching as everything she thought she had, everything she took for granted, was stripped away one piece at a time. She thought she had won, she thought she had played the perfect game, but she forgot one thing: you don't play games with someone who knows how to win before the game even starts. Setting the trap was the easy part, because she had already given me all the tools I needed. All I had to do was put the pieces together in the right order and watch her walk straight into it the way she thought. She was so careful, so clever, never realizing that I had been quietly observing every move, analyzing every detail, until I knew exactly where to strike. And when the moment had to be perfect, a controlled detonation, not reckless, not emotional, just precise and absolute. It started with the emails, the ones I had collected from her work laptop, the hotel confirmations, the receipts, the messages exchanged on company time using company resources. It wasn't just a matter of exposing an affair, it was about professional misconduct, about ethical violations, about decisions that could cost her everything. But I didn't send them immediately, no, that would have been too direct, too simple. Instead, I let them circulate anonymously, first a whisper here, a document there, a well-placed message to someone who had always been waiting for an opportunity to see her fall. Because there's one thing I knew about corporate environments: the higher you climb, the more people are waiting to watch you crash. Then there was him, her boss, her lover, the man who thought he was untouchable. I made sure the files reached the right people: his wife, the board of directors, the investors, the clients, who would be horrified to know what kind of leadership they'd be entrusting. I watched from a distance as the slow unraveling began, the silent meetings, the urgent calls, the first cracks forming in their carefully built facade, and still she had no idea that the walls were closing in around her. The second phase was personal. She thrived on perception. She built her identity around being admired, respected, desired. She was the woman with the perfect career, the perfect relationship, the perfect social circle. So I took that from her too, not in a way that would make me look bitter or vengeful, but in a way that made people doubt her. First, little inconsistencies, well-placed questions, a casual mention to mutual friends about things that didn't quite add up. Did she really have that work trip last month? Because I heard something different. Wasn't she supposed to be at that conference? Because I saw her somewhere else. The seeds of doubt were planted, and doubt spreads like wildfire, especially when it's fed with just enough truth to make it undeniable. And then came the moment of impact, a board meeting, a high-profile event where she was meant to be presenting her latest project in front of executives and investors, where she would be at the center of attention, exactly where she loved to be. She walked into that room confident, composed, completely unaware that while she was standing there speaking, every single person in that room had already received an email from an anonymous source containing everything: the proof, the messages, the expenses, the late-night meetings, the personal rendezvous booked under company funds. The whispers that had been circling around for weeks suddenly crystallized into irrefutable truth. I wasn't there to see it, not physically, but I didn't need to be. I had already imagined the moment in perfect detail, the way the room would go silent, the way faces would turn, the way the realization would hit her all at once like an impact she never saw coming. The way her voice would falter, the way her hands would tremble just slightly as she tried to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. And when she finally looked at her phone, when she finally saw the texts from colleagues, from friends, from the people she had once considered allies, all asking the same thing: what have you done? That's when it would sink in. There was no escape, no denial, no way to twist the story into something salvageable. By the time she left that room, everything she had built was already crumbling: her career, her reputation, her social standing, the life she had taken for granted, slipping through her fingers like sand. But I wasn't done yet, because there was still one last thing, the final nail, the moment where she would realize that the person who did this to her wasn't some anonymous force of karma, wasn't some random stroke of bad luck. It was me, and I wanted her to know it in a way that she would never forget. She came home late that night, later than usual, probably thinking she could still fix it, still control the damage, still somehow manipulate her way out of the disaster waiting for her. But when she opened the door, she found nothing. The house was empty, not ransacked, not dramatic, just empty. My things gone, my presence erased, as if I had never been there at all. Just a single envelope sitting on the kitchen counter waiting for her. Inside were two things: a copy of the divorce papers, signed, dated, ready to be processed, and a single note written in my handwriting. No anger, no insults, no emotion, just 7 simple words: I knew before you even started lying. Because that was the real victory, not just taking everything from her, but making sure that she understood that in the end she had never been the one in control. I had let her think she was winning, let her believe she was untouchable, let her bask in the illusion of deception while I had been standing in the shadows quietly pulling every string. And now as she stood there staring at the empty space where our life had once been, she would finally understand. She never stood a chance. She came home late that night, later than usual, her steps hurried but hesitant, as if she already knew something was wrong but couldn't yet put her finger on it. She pushed open the door, expecting the warmth of home, expecting routine, expecting the comfort of familiarity, but instead she was met with silence and emptiness that seemed to stretch through the entire house. She stopped in the doorway, her breath hitching just slightly, the first crack forming in the confidence she always carried. Then she called my name once, twice, her voice sharper, more urgent, as if she could command reality to stay the same. But there was no answer, because I wasn't there, not anymore. Her heels clicked against the floor as she moved deeper into the house, her eyes scanning the space, realizing too slowly, too painfully, that something was missing. No, not something, everything. My clothes, my books, my presents, wiped clean like I had never existed. The furniture still stood, the walls still held the paintings we chose together, but everything of me was gone, like I had been nothing more than a ghost passing through her life. Then she saw the envelope on the kitchen counter, her name written on it in my handwriting, and that's when it hit her, really hit her. I could almost see it, the way her chest tightened, the way her hands shook just slightly as she reached for it, the way her pulse must have thundered in her ears, because she knew this was it. She tore it open and pulled out the contents. First, the divorce papers, crisp, clean, already signed, stamped, waiting for her signature, waiting for her to make the last move in a game she had never realized she was losing. Her breath came faster, now shallow, like someone drowning, but she hadn't even gotten to the worst part yet. Then she saw the note, just 7 words, handwritten, small, precise, deliberate. I knew before you even started lying. That was when the panic set in, because this wasn't anger, it wasn't an explosion of emotion, it wasn't the dramatic confrontation she had probably rehearsed in her mind the moment she realized she was caught. No, this was something much colder, much sharper. This was the realization that I had been watching the whole time, that she had been exposed long before she ever thought she was being careful, that every excuse, every lie, every stolen moment had never been secret at all, and yet I had let her continue. She staggered back, gripping the counter as if it could hold her together, her eyes darting around the house like the answer might be hiding somewhere in the corners. Then she pulled out her phone, fumbling with the screen, dialing my number, but the call didn't go through. She tried again, voicemail. Her lips parted slightly as she whispered my name under her breath, like she couldn't believe this was real, like she thought if she just said it the way she used to I would appear, but I wouldn't, because this time I was the one who disappeared first. Then came the messages, one after another, desperate, pleading explanations that held no weight. Now I could imagine her standing there trying to find the right words, scrambling to rewrite the narrative, trying to make sense of the fact that she had spent months believing she was the one in control, only to realize that she had been walking straight into a trap from the very beginning, the same way she had manipulated, planned, calculated. I had done the same, but better, because she never even saw it coming. The minutes passed, then an hour, then two, and slowly the reality settled into her bones. The house that once felt like security now felt hollow. The silence stretched, endless, oppressive, just like the loneliness she had condemned me to. She would have to sit in it now, sit in the consequences, sit in the ruin she had built with her own hands, sit in the understanding that the life she had taken for granted had slipped through her fingers. But the real punishment wasn't the empty house, it wasn't even the divorce, it was everything else waiting for her beyond that front door, the career that had already started unraveling, the colleagues who were already whispering, the friends who were already questioning, the affair partner who was already fighting his own battles with the fallout because she had thought she could have it all, keep everything intact, while betraying the one person who had never once doubted her. But the world doesn't work like that. Choices have consequences, and she was about to feel every single one of them. I imagined her standing there staring at the papers, the note, the void around her, realizing that for the first time in her life she had no way out, no way to talk her way around this, no way to salvage what she had broken, no one left to manipulate, no safety net, no backup plan, nothing but the consequences of her own decisions bearing down on her like a weight she could no longer carry. And as I sat miles away from that house, from her, from everything we once were, I let out a slow breath, feeling nothing but satisfaction, because this was justice, not rage, not cruelty, just the simple, cold delivery of exactly what she deserved. The fallout was swift, brutal, and absolute. She had spent so much time believing she was untouchable, so sure that she could balance deception and control, but when the weight of her choices came crashing down, she had nowhere to run. The first blow came from work. The morning after she found the house empty, she walked into the office thinking she could still salvage something, thinking she could talk her way out of the whispers that had already started spreading. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt it, the shift, the eyes, the tension. Conversations cut off when she entered a room, forced smiles that didn't reach the eyes, the way people who once admired her now looked at her like a cautionary tale. She didn't know yet that HR had already received the evidence, that the board had already been briefed, that her boss, her affair partner, was already scrambling to save himself. And when she was called into a meeting, expecting to be the one controlling the narrative, she was instead handed a severance package that made it clear: resign quietly or be publicly dragged through an investigation. She left that day with a hollow expression, knowing that the career she had built, the reputation she had cultivated, was now nothing but a stain she could never wash out. Then came the social collapse. The friends who once admired her, who envied her, who wanted to be in her circle, suddenly distanced themselves as if betrayal were contagious. People don't like associating with scandal, with exposed deception, and as much as she tried to act like everything was fine, no one wanted to be the one standing next to her when the dust settled. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. The group chats that once buzzed with her presence were now silent. The people she thought would defend her didn't want to touch the mess she had created. And worse, the people who had once looked up to her, the ones she loved being admired by, now only saw her as a warning, a reminder of how quickly things could fall apart. Her family, of course, had their own reaction. Her parents, always so proud of her, always boasting about their daughter's achievements, now struggled to even look at her. They weren't just disappointed, they were embarrassed. And embarrassment is a far heavier burden than anger. They didn't understand why she had done it. They didn't understand how she could destroy everything for something so meaningless. And even though they didn't disown her outright, they made it clear that the conversations, the visits, the warmth they once had would never be the same again. But the worst part for her, the part one knew would cut the deepest, was the silence from me. No messages. No anger. No demands. Nothing. Just an absence, an empty void where my presence used to be. She had expected a fight. She had expected a battle, begging, arguments, an attempt to fix what she had broken. But instead, she got erased. And for someone like her, someone who thrived on control, on being the center of attention, on always having a backup plan, that was the real punishment. As for him, the man she had risked it all for, he was facing his own personal disaster. His wife had already been served divorce papers, and from what I heard, she wasn't the type to leave quietly. His position at the company was hanging by a thread, and with the way the scandal had spread, there was no way he could recover without taking a serious hit to his credibility. The affair that had once been so exciting, so thrilling, had now become nothing but a liability. And the moment it was clear that being with her would only make his situation worse, he did exactly what I knew he would do. He cut her loose. Because men like him don't build their lives around their mistakes. They move on, they replace, they find someone else, and she was nothing more than a mistake he needed to bury. So there she was, standing in the ruins of everything she once had. No career, no respect, no backup plan. The man she had risked it all for gone. The life she had taken for granted reduced to nothing. And me? I had already moved forward. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I kept the house, kept the assets, kept everything that she thought she would walk away with. The divorce was clean, smooth, on my terms. I had planned it that way. While she was drowning in the consequences of her choices, I had already built a better life, one free of deceit, free of betrayal, free of her. The last time I saw her was by accident. A chance encounter on the street, months after everything had collapsed. She looked different, smaller, diminished, like someone who had spent too much time looking over their shoulder, waiting for things to get better but never finding solid ground. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, maybe just to hear my voice one last time. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked past her without a word, without a glance, like she never existed at all. Because that was the real victory. Not revenge, not destruction. Just the simple, undeniable fact that she no longer mattered. People say revenge is best served cold, but I disagree. It's best served silent, when there's no screaming, no fighting, no dramatic final confrontation, just the slow, quiet realization that the person you betrayed, the one you took for granted, the one you thought would always be there is gone, and you will never get another chance to fix it. That's what real justice looks like. Not anger, not destruction, just absence, the kind that lingers, the kind that settles deep inside someone and stays with them long. After everyone else has moved on, because that's what happened to her. She wasn't destroyed, not in the way people expect. She wasn't left sobbing in the rain begging for forgiveness. There was no last-minute redemption arc. She simply became irrelevant. And that's the part that people never understand until it happens to them. Everyone thinks revenge is about ruining someone's life, but it's not. The real punishment is being forgotten, waking up every day knowing that the person you once had power over, the person you once manipulated, has moved on without you, without a second thought. Because what she did to me was never about love or passion or even desire. It was about control. She wanted to feel powerful, wanted to feel like she was getting away with something, like she had all the pieces on the board, and I was just another pawn she could move. But she miscalculated. Because I don't play games, I win them before they even start. The last message she ever sent me was a single line: "Do you ever think about us?" And I stared at it for a moment, not because I was considering answering, but because it was proof that she still didn't get it. There was no us, not anymore, not for a long time, maybe never at all. She thought she had taken something from me. She thought she had broken me. But in reality, she freed me from the illusion that we were ever on the same level. Freed me from the idea that she was someone worth fighting for. And when you realize that someone who once meant everything to you is now just a stranger with a past, that's when you know you've truly won. I never responded. I didn't need to. She could sit with the silence the same way I had when she was sneaking around behind my back, the same way I had when she laughed with him while I was at home, trusting her the same way I had when I finally realized that she was never the person I thought she was. Because that's what happens in the end. The betrayer is always left alone looking at the wreckage, wondering where it all went wrong, while the person they underestimated walks away without looking back. So here's my question for you: if you were in my place, if you had the chance to deliver the perfect revenge, would you take it, or would you let karma do the work for you? Because in the end, the only thing worse than losing everything is realizing you did it to yourself. Bye-bye.